All right, welcome back, everybody. My name is Andre Bernier. I'm a LA-based pianist and bass player, and today I just want to give sort of a pianist perspective on what I like in a bass player and what I appreciate and what I don't appreciate on the bandstand when it comes to this instrument. So let's get into it. So I'm going to give you 3 rules for what you should do and 3 rules for what you shouldn't do. And of course, these are not laws, they're just rules that I like to abide by, but I break my own rules occasionally. Don't listen to me all the time on it, but I do think it's things to keep in mind. The first one is this: do not change the root note. This is kind of a hot take because the entire purpose of this instrument is to cover the root notes, but I do not believe the bassist has the right to change the root note. And I know that sounds a little crazy because, of course, we've all heard a bassist change the root note and it's been great in the right context. But if you're playing with a pianist and they're doubling your root note, then you really need to keep that in mind. And you can't just be subbing out chords for, different inversions just because you think it'll sound hip. For instance, I've heard people do stuff like this. You go in 6, 4, 1, 5, and then they'll do this: 6, 4, 1/3, 5. Well, if I'm playing piano and I'm doubling that root note with you and I go down to the C and you go down to the 3, now we have this sound. That doesn't work. Now, the exception to this, I guess, is kind of playing the 5 in something I'm going to mention later, which is pedal points. But at least with a 5, if I hit the root and you hit the 5, that's at least stable, right? Hitting a 3rd is a particularly risky move. So really don't sub the 3rd. And I hear this a lot with new bass players because they get really excited and think that they have to do something. Man, I got to do something to make this interesting. And so they're subbing different notes all the time. But in general, every single chord, you should be hitting the root. One of my favorite bassists of all time is Reed Anderson from the Bad Plus. You will hear him locked to the bass note alongside Ethan Iverson every single time. And it's pretty amazing as far as sounds go. So the second thing that I would say is don't play busy. And this one sounds obvious, and it's probably what you've been getting harped on since high school or middle school for, but there's an instinct when someone's taking a solo to want to contribute, right? And so you want to do, but you can't. You can't do that stuff. I mean, you can, but what's going to happen is you're going to end up in this sort of weaving counterpoint, which can be cool, can be an effect, but you want to make sure it's deliberate and not just something that's happening all the time because you're getting really excited. In general, my rule is this: if someone's doing more, you need to be doing less. And that thing about covering the root, that is your job. Your job is to cover the root. I cannot even tell you how crazy it drives me when somebody starts going off in the middle of one of my solos. And if I just start doing something on piano like this, the last thing in the world I want to hear is my bassist. No, don't do that. You got to hold it down for me. That's your job, is holding it down. Because also, it's creating contrast, if you think about it. There used to be this saying back when I was at Miami. They were talking about big band pushes, and it's something I think about an awful lot. If everybody has a push, which means an anticipation as far as a hit goes, so like boom, doom, 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 ga, doom, doom, like that, right? In a big band setting. If everybody does the push didn't really happen. You need something that's keeping that frame to contrast it against. And that's the whole point of bass to me, is you're creating the frame. The third thing I would say is don't vary the feel or the lines too much. You can, especially octaves, that's great to do. But if you can, that would be so much more effective to solo over than like... Right? Like, if you're trying to solo over the top of that, that's going to be nonsensical. That's going to be way too much information. Don't vary the line. Keep the line for as long as you possibly can, and then at some point change the octave of it, which is something I really, really love to do. Now let's get to the part where we talk about what you should do. One of my favorite sayings when it comes to bass, I believe comes from Miles Davis to Ron Carter. I believe that. I don't know that, but here's the saying. When I go up, you go down. That is the expression that I live by when it comes to other people playing solos. When somebody's at the apex of their solo, the last place in the world that I should be is up here doing a bunch of that nonsense. Like, I should not be there with them. And when people do that on my solos, it kind of drives me crazy, because what it feels like is at the most important moment, the bottom falls out. There's nothing support, there's no cushion anymore. Everything's just in the stratosphere, which can be cool for a moment, right? That like Stanley Clark, like that thing, but then he's back to hitting the root note. So you want to make sure no matter where you go, you're always coming back to hitting the lowest notes that you possibly can. And this is why I've actually moved to 5-string recently, is because just hitting, like, let's say I'm hitting an F, where, you know, this would be the second to lowest note on a normal bass. I love having it right here, because it's very comfortable to play, and I can stay lower for longer and more comfortably this high up on the neck, right? That's very, very easy. So I'm trying to camp somewhere around this range or even lower on the B string during the biggest part of the solo. And if I can, I want to be hitting this D and I want to be hitting this C. I tend to stay away from the B because I think it gets a little insane, but this C is a really nice place to be. Anyways, if you don't want a 5-string, don't worry about any of that. I would just stick in the F and G range if you can. That's where you should be. You should be as low as humanly possible when someone is up high soloing on something. All right, my second you should do this is pedal points. And I know I said don't change the root of the notes, but there's a difference, because a pedal point doesn't happen for one chord. A pedal point takes place over an entire section, especially during jazz. Let's say it's over the bridge or something. If you're doing the bridge to All the Things You Are, it sounds like this. Right? Something I really like to do on that bridge is, instead of going to that 2-5, I will immediately just go to D and pedal. And that creates a really nice tension and release by the time that you actually release back to that F minor. It's something that I think can be overdone or overused or used improperly, especially if you use it too early in someone's solo. But I really, really love it when bassists employ a pedal point at the right time in a solo, because we've all been in that jazz jam session where it feels like it's never ending, like someone's taking their 30th chorus or whatever. To a normal listener, nothing is changing. Even though we understand the theory and, you just played a Lydian dominant, like no one knows any of that. And so the pedal point creates an obvious tension and release point, the way that you don't normally get unless it's built into the form like something like Dear Old Stockholm. So either way, that's my second point, employ pedal points. And the third thing that I would do that I really like when people do on my solos when I'm playing piano is elongate. Somebody who I think is the greatest of all time at this is actually Tommy Shannon from Double Trouble, who is Stevie Ray Vaughan's trio. If you listen to his playing on Lenny, he's playing this. He's spreading out those notes. He's not really like playing anything except for just roots and keeping it very, very elongated. And that gives room for the person soloing over him to take their time, right? And not feel pressured to fill up space. Because that's what your job should be. You should be aiming to make the soloist comfortable. That is really the sole job of bass, is make the vocalist comfortable, and then when there's a solo, make the soloist comfortable, and then make the audience comfortable and able to dance. Your job is comfort, if you think about it. Whatever you can do for others on this instrument, that is the right thing to do. I think at the best that I'm playing supportively. And playing supportively a lot of times means playing longer than you'd think to fill up space. That's just my 2 cents. Elongate as much as you can. It will make everything above it have more room to breathe and time to figure out what they want to say. So those are my 3 points I wouldn't do and my 3 points that I would do. Hit me in the comments if you disagree with anything, if there's anything that you've really found to be useful, and I'll see you on the next one. Until then, keep playing, keep telling me what works for you.